Hello everybody, and welcome to the Surrey Dietetics Let's Insta live chat series. And I can't remember which episode we're on now, probably the sixth episode. But today we are going to talk about what you need to know about Ramadan as nutrition and dietetic students. And obviously, if you are a qualified dietitian, you will find this chat useful as well. And I'm so glad I've got Nusrat with us today. And I've known Nusrat probably forever, and she's qualified in 2008. And when I was a student, Nusrat was already out there practicing dietetics. And I got to know Nusrat from the BDA Yorkshire branch as well, so same as Aaron. And I probably knew Nusrat even before Aaron. And I think one thing I know about Nusrat is, or I wonder about Nusrat is, I don't know where she gets all this energy from. I feel like she's literally doing everything every day, and she's here and there, and she's doing so. Initially, I think Nusrat works in an acute hospital and Leeds teaching hospital, and as no, I think initially, before that you worked in another hospital as well, didn't you? Before you moved to Leeds, and you specialised in critical care. And then obviously then you went on to do diabetes as well. And at the moment you are the clinical director at Primary Care Dietitian. And obviously if anybody checks Nusrat's Instagram and LinkedIn, you will also see Nusrat probably have 100 other responsibilities as well with the BDA. Oh my God, with so many BDA specialist groups, I can't even name them, like diabetes group and the sports group, etc., etc. And I've talked so much. And would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good summary. It's a long journey. It's been about 15 years. Gosh, it's quite scary. And yes, band 5, band 6, specialised in critical care and did quite a lot of other areas, and moved into diabetes. That was a really passion of mine, really interested in that, really interested in type 1 sports and exercise. And from there, postgrad certificate in sports and exercise, and I was keen to sort of start working on freelance. And so just before COVID, I'd launched myself as a freelance dietitian, and my keen area was to sort of focus on type 1 diabetes and sports and exercise, but it was literally the week of COVID. So I'm just to jinx everyone, I'm really sorry, it's my fault. So then after that, I sort of went back to did a bit of locuming, and then I saw these PCN jobs, so primary care nutrition jobs or primary care network nutrition jobs, and I was just interested in diabetes. So yeah, sort of focused for the last couple of years, I was doing that. And then this opportunity came to sort of start a business, maybe to support other dietitians to work in primary care networks. And now we support nearly a team of 30 dietitians at the moment, and it's growing very quickly. So by the end of April, we'll have about 40 or 50 dietitians that I'm supporting clinically. So really proud of all our dietitians. But yeah, I think you've sort of summarised it, and I do a bit of BDA board member stuff. So I'm a board member of Senna, and I'm a board member just recently added to the England board. So watch this, and I think,
Yes.
yeah, be a familiar face there.
That'd be very exciting. And very exciting, because Nusrat and I were both joining the BDA England board as a board member, and there will be lots of stuff happening to support people, particularly people from the BAME background. So watch this space, everybody. And so obviously today's topic is about Ramadan. So I think, Nusrat, if you can just explain to us, what is Ramadan, and what is the significance of Ramadan in the Islamic?
Yeah, I mean, Ramadan is a time of reflection and learning. And for me personally, I always think it's a time where you're fasting, you know, in terms of you're not eating or drinking anything during the sort of hours from sunrise to sunset. So that's the sort of rule of the fasting Islam. And you do it for a full month. So it's the full month of Ramadan, which hopefully starts in the next couple of days, either Wednesday, Thursday. And it's usually due on sort of based on the lunar calendar. So it does change. So compared to last year, it's 10 days earlier this year. So yeah, usually it's a time of reflecting and spiritual, asking God for forgiveness, trying to empathize with other people that maybe don't have food, don't have drink, giving yourself time to reflect on that and where, you know, what you're doing, your journey. So there's lots of spiritual benefits to that. Most religions have fasting. Obviously, our religion in Islam has a full month of fasting, so it's giving you a long time to sort of think and reflect. Yeah, I think that is really all it's about, is just reflecting and thinking and spiritually glorifying God and giving you that time to do that. And there's so many benefits for the Muslims. You know, there's lots of blessings, and there's loads of benefits for you as a Muslim to fast. So most fast will want to fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said it starts from Wednesday this week, doesn't it? And literally just around the corner.
Yeah,
Are
I'm
you ready
always ready. Yeah,
for
Ramadan is such a nice month. Like, because I've been doing it since I was about 7, 8. You know, you sort of start practicing when you're younger, and then you have to sort of keeping them when you sort of hit puberty. So yeah, just been doing them every year since then. I don't think I've ever missed it. So yeah, I'm really blessed that I'm able to sort of fast in Ramadan every year. It's very nice.
Yeah, and I think you carry on working and during Ramadan as well, don't you? And I think before we go into that, I just want to ask again, because we normally assume people know, but perhaps some people don't know. You mentioned about fasting during Ramadan, so I think that's one of the dietary rules, isn't it, for Ramadan? So can you just explain a bit more of what is the dietary rule in terms of
So
fasting during
in Ramadan
Ramadan?
is basically intermittent fasting. Is originally, this is what intermittent fasting has come from. So Michael Mosley himself, he's you know, the 5-2 diet has come from Islam. So what happens after school, that's your morning before breakfast, so your before fast, I guess, but not breakfast, it's before fast, and then you close the fast before the sun rises, so before sunrise, so you won't eat anything then from sunrise till sunset, so you can't drink or eat anything, nothing can pass your mouth, so you can't take tablets, you can't take inhalers, you can't smoke, you can't vape, none of that, and then you eat at sunset, so as soon as the sunset, you start eating, and when most people will open their fast, and that's when you eat. And then from the evening, from sunset to sunrise, those are your non-fasting hours. So if you think of that 5-2 picture in your clock, those sort of remaining hours in the evening will be non-fasting hours. So I think this year it's about a 16-hour fast and an 8-hour night. So yeah, sort of a 16-8 fast.
Right, so it's almost similar to the intermittent fasting of they say eat within 8 hours and fast for 16 hours, although yours probably is during the evening, the eating time rather than during the day. And does it change day to day then? Because, you know, the sunset and sunrise changes as
it'll get longer. So I guess as we get closer to summer, it'll get longer. So it'll start like, you know, maybe 16 hours and then it'll end up at 17 hours. So yeah, every day you have to sort of check on the calendar. So you always get a calendar, or you can use your phone, or you've got the and you sort of tick off like daily. Ooh, you know, it's gone a minute extra this time, or it's a minute less. So yeah.
Yeah. And obviously I talk about intermittent fasting all the time, but I haven't personally tried to say fast for 16 hours and eat within 8 hours. I don't think I've ever actually, maybe I've tried, but never achieved it. And then obviously you do that every year and during Ramadan, and you carry on working at the same time as well. And how do you normally feel? You know, working at the same time.
I've been doing it a long time, so you do have to pick your battles. I mean, before, so when I worked in the hospital, I would actually walk to work. I would take an hour to walk to work, and then I was on the wards, and this was pre-COVID, so you'd be up and down, you'd be on critical care, you'd be on a different ward, and I'm sure most of you, if you've been in a hospital, they're not tiny, so you do get your steps in. I was doing like 20,000 steps a day, and then I would walk back to the train station, get the train back. So there's quite a lot of walking involved, so by the time I get home I'd be really tired, so I would normally have a little nap as soon as I get home and then get up and sort of read any prayers that might need reading and then start prepping. I still live with like family for the last couple of years, so you know they also support, so mum does a lot of cooking, which is great, and then obviously I'll just also prep and support and help. But yeah, it might be that you do have to do reduced duties. I have in the past spoken to employers, so when I used to drive in one of my jobs, I used to get really tired, like I couldn't, you know, it's not safe to drive just because if you go on the motorway, it might not be safe. So then in that case, they were really flexible. They used to let me leave an hour early every day, so I'd sort of use either annual leave or loo time. In the last job where it was longer hours as well, I was allowed to start later, so I was able to, like 10 o'clock. So again, you just, however your brain works. For me, it's always the morning. I find really hard to wake up. If you've fallen asleep after you've eaten, so you might get up at 4 in the morning, eat something, go back to sleep, and then you've got to get a train at 7, or, it's just not. So for me, that extra hour even in bed was just great. So but some people might prefer, they might be morning people, and they just prefer to leave early and sort of have that rest time after. And then you can always rest again, after you've eaten. If you get really tired, you can have another nap, or you've got to sort of do what your body thinks. I mean, in terms of psychologically and what happens with the body, obviously you're affecting all the hormones. We all have sort of evidence of that. Hormones, cortisol, all of that. So it can make the month tricky because you're sort of balancing sleep and then lack of sleep with all of it. So it is hard. I think for me personally, I don't know what other people think who fast. I found it's really hard to concentrate on a task and then sort of keep my concentration and keep time. So if I've got to see a patient, I've only got half an hour. Sometimes I'm so engrossed and I can't realize that actually been an hour. So for me, it's that gap of not being able to concentrate on the time, but it will affect people differently. Some people get really tired and hangry. I don't get that. I'm standard, I'm pretty time, unless I'm really like
You don't get hungry. That's very good. And I guess you mentioned about tiredness here. You mentioned about concentration here. What are those the common challenges people can face during Ramadan? And on top of that, although I know it's different for each individual, but what are the common challenges?
The concentration, possibly due to lack of sleep, and it can be or broken sleep, or unstructured sleep, etc. Sometimes people obviously can feel quite hungry. People with like different health conditions, may get really tired and fatigued. So fatigue is a big one, and it might not affect you at work, it might affect you afterwards. So it depends on your sort of body really. And then I think you do feel hungry, but usually I think for me, because you're not thinking about food all day, and you're not thinking, when am I eating lunch, so you're not actually thinking about hunger, you're not triggering hunger, and it's not until the end of the evening when you start thinking, I'm going to eat, that you get hungry. I guess hungry, some people, there is some evidence to say some people get a little bit more angry, but then other that people actually have better mood, are less depressed, are happier, because maybe they're just being in touch with themselves, and they're obviously being more spiritual, and they're doing a bit more self-thinking and reflection. So I think the challenges can be just that, managing the sleep and the fatigue, and those two things personally. Please do. You've got other challenges that you've faced.
Yeah. And obviously you can't drink during the day or any of the fluid intake. And I guess people probably will feel quite thirsty, I guess, especially if they carry on working during the day. And so how do people in terms of the hydration, because obviously we talk about nutrition, but hydration is very, very important. If we can't drink during the day, what's the best way to sort of overcome that thirst feeling and also improve the hydration?
I was thinking
when you
about
can drink?
being like an athlete, you have to think about rehydration and refueling after. So think of think of it like an activity of a sport, I guess. So you would always try and make sure you get your fluid back in those non-fasting hours. So ideally 1 to 2 cups of fluid at the meal. You want to avoid caffeinated drinks, especially for sahur. So in the morning, you don't want to be having loads of caffeinated drinks, tea and coffee, because actually it's just going to make you pee and lose the fluid. So you're much better drinking plain water, unsweetened drinks that aren't going to quickly put your sugar up and make you, sort of stimulate insulin and make you feel tired. So fluid, drinking a couple of glasses, like I say, each meal, so in the morning, and then after you've opened your fast, trying to maybe gradually drink fluids. If you've got a busy job, or you're quite active, or maybe you are an athlete, or you do lots of exercise and you're still continuing to do that, or maybe, like me, you're walking 2 hours a day to work. Again, it's just about making sure you do drink additional fluids to rehydrate yourself in those hours, and as much as possible not be fluids that are going to cause dehydration. And possibly sometimes including a bit of salt and some minerals in that as well. So you may need, if you've been sweating a lot, or, you know, particularly in the warmer weather or warmer countries, people may need to think about electrolyte replacement as well. So a little bit of salt or drinks, and using fruits and things to give yourself the minerals and magnesium and things like that.
That's great, because I was just going to ask you about what if it's because this, I think this year probably compared to Ramadan in the summer, we are still in the early spring, if we are in spring now. But you did mention that, you know, just to make sure the electrolytes, and to make sure do not drink things like caffeinated drinks that can actually make you more dehydrated. So I think this a good tip. So probably just plain water or some flavored water, I guess that should be fine, but not high in sugar as well. Perfect. Okay. And you mentioned some more. I guess this is that the morning
Yeah.
meal before sunrise. Yeah. And then what was the meal called for the when you break the fast?
Iftar.
Iftar. Okay. And do you have any specific foods
Yeah,
you
so
consume
usually
during the 2
breakfast,
meals?
I mean, there's no like regulatory rule, but Ramadan is famous for having dates. So dates, usually dried dates. So that's particularly for breaking your fast. So the Prophet used to have dates, and we have a rule. So say ideally you want it to be an odd number of dates. So most people will try and have like an odd number of dates. So like 1 or 3 or 5. So that's usually how you would break the fast, and then obviously water, and then follow that up with food. And then I guess it is just cultural. It's whatever you would normally culturally eat. Otherwise, there's nothing different. I guess in Ramadan, though, it's about thinking about being healthy. You know, although you sort of think you're just going to gorge and eat everything you want, if you were truly doing an intermittent fasting diet, you will be trying to eat healthily. So I think it's still about trying to maintain good nutrition practices during Ramadan. So thinking about your meals on your plate. So you want some slow releasing carbohydrates, you want some fruits, you want some vitamins and minerals, you want some protein in that meal. And then, you know, you want to make sure you've got that at each meal. So both meals, ideally, a really good split would be, they'd probably be quite similar in size. You know, you don't need a smaller breakfast, because technically you need to get through the day. And then you want to have in your fasting hours a couple of snacks, maybe protein, and again carbohydrates. So depending how big you are, depending how much energy you've used in the day, you may need to make up those extra calories and snacks. So obviously if you're 6 foot compared to someone who's 5 foot and, you know, tiny, you're going to need more calories and more protein and nutrition. So making sure those extra snacks you have got those. Some really like healthy breakfast, you know, I guess could be porridge, making sure you've got some nuts in there, maybe some fruit. You may want to think about having milk as a drink. Milk's quite a nutritious drink. It's obviously got protein and it's not dehydrating. So things like that. And then maybe some fruit on the side as well if you want. And the same at dinner time or iftar. When you open the fast, you want to have some carbohydrates again, ideally slow releasing with some protein, with a couple of glasses of water or fluid again. And then if you can always have desserts, but ideally you want to do everything in moderation. So Islam is about eating too much. Yeah. Obviously people do, and you know, it depends on your family situation. In our house, we eat quite regularly, we eat quite normally, so we would almost do the 5-2, but switched around. We have 5 days of really healthy eating, and then 2 days where we're like, okay, let's have a few extra snacks or treats or starters. But obviously, you know, from a health point of view, you can make anything healthy or unhealthy, can't you? So you could fry food, or you could actually steam it. You know, there's different ways of depending on your making things healthier.
Absolutely. Do you normally gain weight or lose weight?
Like I say, I've been really active. Normally I lose weight. These last couple of years I've been more working from home, not as active. So I don't actually lose weight and I don't gain weight. You do sometimes lose fluid initially. So you've lost initial fluids, and then I do lose a little bit. But that's, like I said, quite healthy. And I think Eastern countries, people tend to lose more weight because, again, they'll have more meat, proteins and things. They don't eat as much carbohydrate. I think typically what I find is the South Asian community tend to put more weight on because they will fry and make more starters and desserts as well. You know, they can be really high in sugar and really high in calories. And if you've got like fried samosas and pakoras, then, whereas I think in the Middle East countries, they will have rice and a really healthy grilled protein. So they're probably not going to put on as much weight if they did have a nice starter or a sweet dessert after. Yeah, it's about thinking about what works for you. I mean, some people might be trying to lose weight, and in that sense, actually Ramadan might be helpful to help you kickstart that weight loss journey, thinking about your meals, trying to portion control. You've got 30 days then of being able to really put some really good practices in place. And some people might be trying to gain weight, which is obviously, again, a great time to
I did read a systematic review on Ramadan and weight management, and did say that many people across a few studies, they did find people tend to lose weight during Ramadan, but then they put the weight back on after Ramadan finishes. So I guess that just highlights the importance, as you said, although it is indeed intermittent fasting, but the food choices you make is very important as well. And so if you make the right healthy choices, then you can lose weight if that's your intention. But if you say eat a lot of high fat and high calorie and snacks and during the when you break the fasting, then that's probably where you still gain weight. So it's not just about intermittent fasting on its own, it's also about
but also if you're eating those things really tired, because if you're having a really sugary dessert and you're having lots of heavy starters, that's actually going to add to the tiredness. Whereas if you eat healthy portions and you're not sort of stimulating those high sugars, you're not going to feel as tired. So in essence, and if you're not having lots of sugary drinks and sweets, again, you're not going to see those spikes in your sugar. And normal people will have that. Even I work in diabetes, so I think diabetes, but even in normal people that will happen, and you'll get that post-lunch slump type thing where you'll just want to sleep. So actually, by having really good nutritional practices, or maybe spreading out the desserts, I always try and have my dessert as a snack after, so it's not at the meal. So might be little practices you could think about. Obviously, from a health point of view as well, it's really helpful in the sense that if people smoke, if people drink alcohol, or if people have little vices, things like that, they're not doing those, or so it can again just prompt healthy changes in lifestyle and behaviour that maybe that smoking wasn't good for you, and if you're not smoking for that many hours, so it could be a good time to think about quitting smoking. And if you do have lots of chocolates and sweets and stuff, I don't know, it depends what people want to do. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
And I actually, from one side, I would admire you for being able to control yourself when you break in iftar, because even if I haven't eaten for a few hours, or if I have been fasting for a few hours, what happens is I'll just start to eat whatever I want to eat and binge on the food. And I guess I'm sure I'm not alone, and I think many people probably would have the issues of over consuming food or overeating after a long period of fasting. Do you have any advice on that in terms of avoiding overeating or overconsumption, particularly overconsumption of high energy, high
I think
fat
it is
foods,
about
unhealthy
filling your
foods?
plate with those healthy, nutritious foods. So thinking about your protein, really, try and make it healthy, because a lot of people will eat lots of carbohydrates and fill themselves up on carbohydrate. And yes, carbohydrate's good for energy, slow releasing glucose, but actually protein and healthy fat is needed to keep you full. So making sure you're sort of spreading that out is actually sometimes more beneficial. And I think as a South Asian population that I work with, we tend to have reduced amounts of protein at our meals sometimes, maybe not in the iftar, but the breakfast. So actually getting that extra nutrition and thinking it through, like, what would I normally eaten in a normal day? I mean, it's a good month to think about your habits. If you're an emotional eater, that'll show through. If you eat because you're bored, that'll show through. Because if you've not, you won't have that tendency to eat if you're bored, because you won't be allowed to eat. So you'll notice that. So it's a good way of learning. And there's always going to be days where sometimes you are going to binge, but you've got yourself 30 days to really get to know yourself, reflect on what's going on. So it's a really good time. When you think about a diet, it's like going on a diet, isn't it? You're radically making changes and you're thinking, right, what am I doing? So it's about reflecting on those behaviors, I think. Obviously trying to, as much as possible, pre-prep. So thinking about suhoor, if you're 4 o'clock in the morning, if you've been to sleep at like 10, 11 o'clock, you're going to be so tired. You might not be planning to think about your breakfast and what you need to make and who's going to sit and chop a banana, or, so you want to maybe do a lot of prep before. So for sahur particularly, I would definitely suggest pre-prepping, chopping fruits and vegetables, chopping anything you need to chop. If you can make food before, try and do that. Make it easier for you to make good choices, of limiting foods in the house and things like that. It really just depends what mindset is. Hiding it, I mean, some of the strangest things are just making it in a higher shelf or moving it so it's not easy. Habits, a huge thing at the moment, like triggers and habits. It's thinking about what are your triggers and what are your habits, and again reflecting and using every day to learn. So the benefit of Ramadan is you've got 30 days to really get to grips with what you normally do.
Yeah, I guess that's really a good way to learn about yourself. And I wonder whether or not it would be helpful to say when you start, just drink plenty of fluid first, because sometimes people do think thirst as hungry, but they just need more fluid. And then obviously then have some more healthy options, such as the fruit and veg at the start. And then that fuels them a little bit, give them a bit of satisfaction perhaps, and then reduce the chance to eat more high calorie food,
and
did you
then,
say?
like you say, you do that as a starter, and then you will pray. So you've got 5 prayers in the day normally, and if you're trying to reflect, improve yourself Islamically, you may try and you might be doing 5 already, but maybe you only did 1 a day before, and it's that opportunity to do more. So there's one at that time of Maghrib, so you could almost have a few starters, drink plenty of fluids, go read the prayers, take 10-15 minutes, however long you need, come back and then just eat a meal. So you sort of, like you say, pre-prepping, and then that just spaces it out, and then have some more fluid, have the protein, have the carbohydrates. So yeah, definitely one way. And then again, think about your pudding as maybe a snack for later that you could incorporate into having a protein, some carbohydrate. Spreading it out can help. And I'm thinking diabetes, but from a diabetes point of view, that's also really helpful for managing your blood glucose levels. But
yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously during the month, many people's dietary patterns probably will change to having more meals in the evening, and obviously you need to fit in your sleep around as well, especially when the night time is shorter and when the daytime becomes longer. And do you feel your sleep quality changes, and how do people
definitely
manage
does. Yeah,
that
you will have broken sleep and you'll feel more fatigued because of that. And then, as I say, if you're waking up in the morning, you've got adrenaline, cortisol waking you up, and then sometimes it's harder to fall back asleep. So then some people might not sleep. They might just sit and pray, read Quran, get themselves into the zone, then set off for work. So then they've been up, with maybe just 3 or 4 hours sleep. It's really hard. And personally, on a personal basis, I always use things like sleep calculators, because I truly believe you sleep in like 90-minute rhythms, and all the sleep evidence shows that, doesn't it? So sometimes it might be about looking at your circadian rhythm and trying to get a couple of hours sleep in those rhythms, so 90-minute cycles. So I think there's some evidence to suggest that if you're sleeping within those, you'll be fine. But if you're woken up halfway through that rhythm, that's when you feel more fatigued. So it may be looking at things like sleep calculators, using that to work out, what is 3 to 4 hours of decent 90-minute cycles, and try not to sort of break that. So that's one tip I personally have seen that might work. And then, it's just about trying to nap and whatever works for you. If you need to have a nap, if you need to have a rest, even at work, it could be that you have that 30-minute lunch break and you just go and rest. If you need to sleep, you sleep, or if you need to pray, you pray, and just use that time to rest. So even if you're not eating, I would highly, highly recommend people do take that half an hour to just rest. And I do say we just go and turn the heater in the car and sleep in the car for half an
hour. Just take every opportunity, and also learn, as you said, learn about yourself and find the way that fits your daily routine, basically, during Ramadan. And so in terms of the fasting, what are the recommendations for fasting during Ramadan for people who have illnesses, so such as acute illnesses or diabetes or renal issues, gastro issues, etc.? And who
there are
exempt
a few people
from
exempt. So
fasting as well?
if you're not if you're a child, if you haven't hit puberty, you don't need to fast, so that's not needed. Some children do fast, and some parents do like children to fast, but it might not be a true fast. And then elderly, if you're elderly, if you're unwell, if you can't look after yourself, you can be also exempt if that's the case. If you've got a long-term sickness or condition where maybe you do need to take medicines, you need to be doing things regularly, like you say, kidney disease, dialysis, where you're probably going to be more at risk. Islam's not about making yourself in a worse situation. So if your life is at risk, then you shouldn't really be fasting. If you're pregnant, you're exempt. A lot of pregnant women do like to fast, and there has been studies actually on pregnancy to show, I think the babies are very clever. They literally take what they need, but it's not recommended. So if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, so if you've got a child that you're breastfeeding, again, you don't need to. And then other people who are exempt are things like travellers, people who are travelling, they're exempt. In terms of diabetes, bit of a controversial one, and I think it's up to you, because type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, if you're on medicines, if you're on insulin, you might not always be safe, depending if you've got high HbA1c, you might not be safe for you. So it's worth discussing with your medical team. Often you should have, ideally, in an ideal world, people with diabetes will have had a conversation with their doctor or nurse to say, you need to reduce this medicine, or maybe think about changing your insulin here. But we know with type 1 diabetes, it can be tricky to manage because you do need that background insulin. So yeah, certain conditions, and then obviously if you in yourself feel, if I fast, it's going to be dangerous to me, it's not safe, then we do know a lot of people, don't fast. And you can pay something called fidya, so you can pay money for people. So the aim will be that you would feed someone else, for a day, or equivalent of monies you would either give, or you would actually go and feed someone if you can, that means replace the meal that you couldn't keep those fasts.
Definitely, and I think it's so important to communicate with your client and your patient as well, because I know some people perhaps they have illnesses and they would like to observe Ramadan and they would like to fast, and sometimes it might not be entirely safe for them. So I think it's quite important to closely work with those patients and even refer them to the relevant healthcare professionals. But I think most importantly is how we can support them, and because sometimes they might not be able to fast all the time, but I guess it's not just about to say no, you can't, you're exempt, but then to try to understand them and then see how we can help them.
I think, sometimes if you're working in a hospital, you might have access to chaplaincy departments. If you've got someone on critical care trying to fast, I would definitely recommend asking the chaplain to come and have a chat, because they will be exempt, from they're ill. If you're living in a community or setting, again, you could ask them to speak to the local mosque. Sometimes GPs really struggle for people to not fast, and it could be that you just have to speak to someone who, like an imam, someone that the person trusts, that you can get advice from, or refer them to, because they may not believe a healthcare professional. Sometimes me, because I'll say, look, the religion doesn't do that, but if you're a Caucasian person telling someone not to fast, they might not agree with you because they might think you don't understand. So yeah, we understand you want to fast, but there are conditions here that you definitely possibly will be exempt, or this would make you unwell. Antibiotics once, because I had a really bad foot infection, and I said to the doctors, can I just not, I'm just going to avoid taking these because I really want to fast. And they just said, Nusrat, you work on critical care, and if you end up with sepsis, it's going to be really, really bad. So you just need to take a few days off and take the antibiotics and fast. So even I was being silly, and they were like, no, you need to stop. So I was like, okay. So it takes everyone's really keen to fast in Ramadan because it's such a beautiful month. A lot of people actually donate a lot of money to charity in Ramadan as well. You get a lot of blessings, you get a lot of things like good deeds added to your sort of balance of good deeds, the scale on your shoulders. So a lot of people do give a lot of money to the poor. They donate what's called zakat, so it's money that you have to give. So a percentage of your wage, every Muslim, if they're working and they're earning, should be giving. So a lot of people do give that in Ramadan. So it might just be that people who can't fast just need to give the Ramadan, give the zakat, give some fidya to say that we've tried and done your best to explain.
Absolutely. Are there any potential health risks associated with
So as you've
fasting
said
during
already,
Ramadan?
there's fatigue, there's dehydration. So yes, there is a high risk of dehydration in some individuals. If you've got diabetes, there's a high possibility if you're not managing or you're not eating properly, or if you've not changed your medicines, there's a high risk of you going hypo. Or sometimes also there's a risk of you having a possible DKA or hyperglycemia, so the risks of that. So sometimes not having, if you've got too much high sugars or too low sugars, and the risk of hypo, if severe, you really should be breaking your fast and having something to eat, because there's been studies to show that the brain can be affected. So it's not, that's the sort of thing I would suggest.
Excellent. And if people want to know more about Ramadan, and is there any
Yeah,
resources they can refer
for
to?
nutrition and dietetic students, there's some really, really good ones that I have recently rediscovered. So it's called the IDF DAR. They have a really good booklet. It's it might even be 12 chapters, and it's chapter 8 that if you look through, you can get some really nice advice, exactly what to advise people with diabetes, which would still suit the rest of the population. There's lots of resources on No Diabetes websites, Diabetes UK, all the usuals. I think the BDA also has lots of information on Ramadan, and then the NH usually has good guide, but most employers now have like guidance on how to treat and manage. If you work in hospital, be able to access something. But there's plenty of really good resources online.
Yeah. And if you're a nutrition and dietetic student and is a member of the BDA, you obviously have access to Dietetics Today. So in this month, they have an article called Nutrition and Ramadan. So that's in this month Dietetics Today. So if anybody wants to read, and definitely I think it's a really good read. It's not very long, so I think it's a good resource. And any final advice or tips for our dietetic students? I just noticed the time; it has gone so quickly.
I think it's just being really having that conversation. If someone is fasting, just check with them. So the only other reason someone wouldn't fast is if you're a woman and you're menstruating. You don't need to fast. You can't fast on those days. So there might be days where you see a colleague eating and you're like, oh, what are you doing? But actually, that's why. But generally, I would say just being really patient with people, giving them a bit of time. If you're an employer or manager, really just checking with the person what works for them. Do they need any flexibility? Do they need a bit of a longer lunch break? What can you do that would just support them? As a non-person with diabetes, non-person who's not fasting, and so obsessed with diabetes out, it may be worth, there is a challenge on the online at the moment saying like to try and fast. So if you feel you want to sort of keep with your Muslim colleague, it could be worth trying. Maybe you don't avoid drinking, maybe you just try not eating and see how that feels. But have plenty of fluids. So yeah, sometimes the best way I've found with learning about patients or anyone's walking in someone's shoes is to walk in their shoes, isn't it? So like G feels, have that down, to know people. So yeah. Opportunity to do a little bit of fasting or intermittent fasting.
Yeah. I think I might give it a go, not a month, but perhaps maybe even just a few days. Exactly as you said, Nusrat, it's just like if you want to have true empathy, what's better than just to, just try it yourself. I think I'm going to give it a try and maybe self-reflect as well and learn about myself. And thank you so much. We've got some questions, and I've seen like there are chats going on, and while we are chatting, there are chats going on in our comments as well. And thank you so much for your engagement. And we have answered some of the questions already during our chat. And one thing that the students ask me is, what are the main nutrients that you should focus on when breaking your fast? And I think you sort of have discussed. You have mentioned it, and just see if I have remembered it, and that's right. So obviously it's the hydration, it's the fluid intake to make well hydrated, and obviously the slow release carbohydrates, and focusing on the slow release, not the high sugary one, and obviously the protein as well, and the healthy fat, and I don't know, I think you probably have mentioned, I think another, from my point of view, perhaps fiber as well. But I guess like if you make healthy choices and using the slow release carbohydrates and fruit and vegetables, I think that itself will ensure the fiber
If you've got
intake.
some dairy, if
Anything,
you've got some, whole grain.
and nuts as well, yeah. And anything else you'd like to add to that question? And that's right, like what are the
No, I think that's
nutrients do
good.
you
I
think we
think
should
obviously it's
focus
still
on?
winter, and if you're thinking about your BAME population, so I shouldn't use BAME anymore, but anyone from ethnic backgrounds who are dark skinned like myself, we will be obviously not getting sufficient vitamin D. So it may be that if really doesn't have a great diet and they know that, they may think about considering a multivitamin, but definitely anyone in the UK, particularly in winter, should be taking vitamin D, but anyone from a dark skinned background should be taking vitamin D all year round. So I would definitely say like maybe some vitamin D, some multivitamins, and then thinking about your calcium is the only other thing. But if you've got a glass of milk, a little bit of some fruits and vegetables, and a little bit of protein, hopefully you should be able to get that. And dates usually have a little bit of calcium, and yeah.
Yeah, such an excellent. I'm obsessed with vitamin D. I can't believe I forgot about vitamin D. Absolutely, especially like I think with ethnic minorities, they are at risk of vitamin D deficiencies already, aren't
Make,
they? And it's winter time, and then
yeah.
you're fasting, and yeah, yeah, and that's such brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Nasrat, and thank you so much for coming to chat to us today as well. And just trying to think, I do have something at the end I want to ask. Oh, I remember now. So obviously today we focus on Ramadan, and obviously Nasrat, you're from the Pakistani background, aren't you? And we have more people observing Ramadan. So for example, Chinese people and people, I think, all around the continents, and they are observing Ramadan. So I think there are wider from a dietary point of view, there are wider like diets out there for people who are observing. So just bear that in mind. But I think the principles are the same, isn't it? And that's right. In terms of what we've discussed, it applies to regardless of what your ethnicity is or ethnic diet is, the
Yeah,
principles
that's why
are the
I've kept
same,
it
would you
quite
say?
vague, as in, I've not said have rotis, chapatis, because I think that's just whole grains. Every country will have whole grains, every country will have protein, and it'll be suitable for them. There's going to be millions of people. I think in the UK there's 4 million, and of those 4 millions, like you say, there's so many different cultures and ethnicities fasting, so there will be different. But I think my advice stands for all of the same. It doesn't matter what ethnicity, if we're just talking about the nutrients. It may be worth having a look at things like there is a dietetic manual available, isn't there, for different ethnic minority diets. So if you as students, hopefully you've got access to Surrey online, either remote or in person book. So there's a really good. I've forgotten the name of the title, but if you just put dietetic manual and ethnic foods, I'm sure it'll come up.
Yes, everybody, it is available on our
Yeah.
Surrey library. You can access online, free access. Very good. Thanks for that plug, Nasrat. And thank you again. And if people want to follow you on social media, find you on social media,
So it's just this,
how
so
can they find
Nusrat
you?
KRD, so at Nusrat KRD, and it's across the same on all social media. So I am on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm not on TikTok. I refuse to be on TikTok, but otherwise I'm everywhere. Thank you.
Yeah, you are literally everywhere, and I can see you everywhere. That means I'm everywhere as well. So if you can follow me, everybody, at Long Li Pro, that's my that's my handle, and I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter as well. So anyway, thank you so much, Nasral, for your chat today, and we will speak very soon, everybody.
Right,
Have a
long.
good
Have a nice
evening.
evening as
Bye
well.
bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for engaging. Bye.
Bye bye.